about the process? Or the process, according to Dave? Any other process questions? Really? Yes. Thank you.
How were the 40-year-olds and under included in this process?
That's a great question. Okay.
We engaged with Nick and the youth, so we did an interview process with them, but an online one, so it was personal, and that was illuminating and fun. Also, a number of the partners we engaged with outside the community were younger, and their views, in which you are, and then you can answer the one more.
And the one more thing is that we were noticing, we asked demographic information in the survey for a reason, so that we could see who was responding, like who was missing in that, right? And so we began to realize that it was really verging older in the survey the survey responses. So what happened is that there were individual reach outs to people who were on the younger spectrum very intentionally. And there were reach outs to newer members as well to make sure that we got their opinions. And they came through strong with that, not surprisingly, personal reach out. We want to know what you think. We really care. Please tell us what you think. That really did make a big difference in the response. Thank you. Great question. Yeah.
This is not a question. I just want to applaud your inclusion of the rest of the community, meeting with the mayor and other members of the outside community. It's very important that we be aware of what's out there, not just make assumptions ourselves.
Yeah, and thank you.
Just to add to that, one of the things that we got from that engagement is they felt that you were at a crossroads as well.
Yeah.
And they were also nervous about where you might go in terms of comfort, and really excited if you choose the road of possibility and reimagining. So there was an excitement that they had for your future, which again is amazing.
But that, you talk about they want you, every community. I've been on a plan commission in a small town, but every community you watch, they want this company, this there. But if it goes across the border, not everybody's going to move with them. And so it's kind of, because we're, we've gone from me and an Appleton to a Fox Cities.
Right.
So if somebody gets something, it doesn't mean that anybody else really loses out.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes we spend a lot of time as communities giving everything we can away to these businesses to come in, because then we have that star on our paper. And what's the bottom line? And if, all these people, we live in a fairly conservative, moderately conservative area, and people are going to the churches that reinforce their beliefs. And we see this in society in general.
Yeah, I'm not going to dive into this question extensively because it's a long conversation, but there is shifting happening for sure around affinity in going to spaces where there isn't that diversity, where we go to a space that we want, where we have a belief, and I'm going to go here because that affirms that. But there is a shift. And I think the shift is also happening within the Fox Valley around diversity, around who's coming into the city itself. In a space to provide the change that requires. We've also, in meeting with the city, realized you're in a unique place in how you work together as a community.
Yeah.
And there is amazing community engagement within this city that I'm not seeing in other regions. So there is some real strength within the community itself.
How have you addressed the trend in churches today for declining membership across the entire church world?
Yeah, declining membership is across the church world for sure.
How have you addressed that?
There is not one solution to that. If I had the magic bullet of addressing that, I would be very famous and in all those places. But I think that the way forward is to not tap into denomination, history, tradition. This is how we've always done it, therefore this is how we always need to do it. In any business model, when you see decline, business changes. The the church doesn't. We tend to do the exact same things over and over again to our demise. So there is this need for reimagining that needs to happen from within, not based on what everyone else is doing. And I think that's where we need to be cautious. We can go to conferences and go to other places and go, this is what's working there, this is what's working there. And that will not get us to the place we need to go. What we need to do is go, who are we? Let it kind of percolate within the place in which we're in, the attributes and the strengths that we carry, and how can we live into our collective purpose together. So, and I think that process is happening.
Also, there was real clarity that you all are different than so much of the other congregations in the Fox Valley. And so that's part of where the excitement in the city came in, and the excitement in the partners that we talked to. And you all as well, why you were here in the first place, right? There are plenty of conservative churches that people can go to and experience church in a particular way. There are plenty of mainline churches that people can go to and do the same thing over and over again. You all, however, are really on the precipice of doing things differently, and that being very attractive to others. Did I see you back?
I was just wondering how you engage people with disabilities, particularly those with cognitive disabilities.
How you engage people with disabilities?
How you in your survey, I mean, did you engage anybody with disabilities?
Yes,
Yes. You said, where are you?
yes, we did.
What was that?
How do we engage people with disabilities, in particular cognitive disabilities, in the survey? There were people who self-identified as having disabilities in the survey, and especially cognitive disabilities. And those people were, they responded and told us about that. But that said, I believe that we could have done a better job around that as well. Anything else around the process? Okay. Should we go into what's next?
Let's go on what's next.
Okay. So, as Pastor Steve said, the steering team received this report, and the church council received the report, and we met with the people who came to our retreats last night, and they received the report and engaged in conversation. You all are the next circle outside of that, and we're just going to keep kind of expanding these concentric circles as we move out. The steering committee has realized and that they can't do these next steps alone, that they need someone to walk alongside them to move into implementation. So, Church Council hired us to continue walking for a few more months alongside you. And this is what that will look like. First of all, you need to celebrate Steve and love on him and go through this next month together.
Yes.
So, after you do that and you take a deep, deep breath, we will add another concentric circle for feedback and analysis of this work. So it's a pretty small team, our core team, right? It's like five or so people. We'll add a concentric circle, a representative concentric circle, where we will continue for continued engagement. Part of the gifts in you all being congregational is that you really care about each other's voices and want to hear them. And so the process that we're putting together is really a congregational process for engagement in decision making. So first we'll add another circle that the church council will be talking about at our next meeting, just in about an hour or so. Then we will engage in a collaborative effort to review the data again and crystallize those core values and purpose with definitions so that there's a great deal of clarity. That will be done through conversation, worship, and small group meetings. Then we'll be creating a process, curriculum with the steering committee and that next concentric circle outside to further explore the meanings of the core values that we identified from our first engagement. So this curriculum will be used by naturally occurring groups. You have so many of them already. The Wild Women, the DEI communities, the choir, worship planners, there's so many. And that be another area of feedback loop. So those groups will be planning this summer and will be coming in the fall. Once those definitions are created and are clear, the easy part is creating the strategic filter. The hard part is defining those words and that purpose. And then we'll move into a strategic filter that will be used for all levels of decision making. And we will go through practice rounds to figure out how to do that. We'll then take that and have conversations around worship in particular, and the building and the plant usage as well, and also one other aspect of your life together that hasn't been defined yet.
After the strategic filter has been created along with the city's potential stakeholders, want to discover what's possible on the plant, on the site itself, with the objective of generating income sustainability, as well as serving the larger needs within the community. So by the time we're done, we will have clarified the objectives that comes from the congregation, how that can link to property development, as well as animating this space for social and community impact. We believe deeply that when we can open up our space, it impacts those around us in multiple of ways. And you're part of that community, you're part of that change, you're part of that impact. It's also a matter about widening who you are. It includes who you are, but also begins to go out, widening who you are. That it's bigger than just you, but it also includes those who are within your neighborhood and community and how we can engage with them. So that is our next steps. We'd love to open it up for any questions that you have on what's next. We want to see this move to implementation, to move to action, and to see the energy around what change could look like moving into the future. So any questions on that?
So beyond talking to the church council, how do we get involved if we want to?
How do you get involved? I would say talk to church council, staff. We would love to have participation and involvement. So I think that's, Chris, is that the best one to talk to? Yeah. Talk to Chris. Yes.
If they would call Carolyn too in the church office, she'd be certainly glad to direct them to the.
Yep, absolutely. Call Carolyn at the church office. Yes. Fine to meet you. Yes.
Have you done this before on this kind of a scale?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I can give a number of examples. I'll use one in Montreal. Anglican Church right downtown Montreal. Again, the narrative in Canada around heritage buildings is there's high deferred maintenance. Every time we do an assessment, it's usually around $3 million. I don't know why it's always $3 million. It's just the number. But often $1 to $3 million in deferred maintenance, aging congregation, and they have transitioned or transformed, I would say transformed, that space into a community hub. And they have a circus. I didn't know this, but Cirque du Soleil, which you're all familiar with, kind of comes out of Montreal. Yes. What I didn't know is that 30,000 circus performers come out of Montreal and go out into all the world, Vegas and Europe and all around, but they don't actually have a space in Montreal where they can perform. So because of the high ceilings and the ways in which church spaces are, we now have circus in the church. And I got to not participate because I'm not circusy, I got to attend, I did not participate, I attended. And it was fantastic. The lights, the animation of the space, the energy in the space, had over 400 that come out and attend the circus. They do it once a month. They practice in the space. But they also have 30 other organizations that meet in the space on a Sunday, and they have 3 worshiping communities that also worship on that space. But that doesn't meet their deferred maintenance bill. They just now have engaged with the city on a long-term, on a process, creating a expression of interest. There was a developer that has then signed on to that, and they are not doing housing, they're doing actually a museum that connects to their values as a congregation, that is going to be built on that site that will give them $8 million back into meeting their $3 to $5 million different maintenance bill. So so that's happening across the Canadian context. And we are doing more projects in the States because the narrative becomes the same.
Just another example, Arlington Presbyterian Church in Virginia we worked with as well, and they sold their building. That was a decision that they ended up making, and they erected housing for people with developmental disabilities, affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities. And then they, on the ground floor, they have some worship space and office space, and then they have a kitchen as well for refugees that it's used as a way for them to make their own living, right? So they are deeply embedded in the community, and the people in the housing space and in the kitchen area, they really are the hub that all of these organizations are working around. They also have a garden. There's a whole long story about it, which is, I won't tell you now, I promise, but it's really amazing. And that garden is being completely animated by the community as well. That has been especially important during COVID, obviously. In selling their building, they realized that they didn't know what to do with all the money they had. I mean, they knew some things they had to do, like they had to create a worship space and they had to create a building and all of that kind of thing, but they received so much of an influx that they were beginning to argue about how to spend it and how to invest it and what they were supposed to do with it and how they were supposed to budget. It completely shifted their money narrative. So we also helped them in putting together this strategic filter, in naming their core values and putting together the strategic filter, which is now how they do budgeting. And the budgeting has also shifted where it's often, a few people who sit around and say, okay, what were the line items last year? What are the line items going to be this year? We're going to transfer those over. But they have a whole big community conversation around what's needed in the community each year before they even start the budgeting process. And then that is worked through the strategic filter, and there aren't fights anymore about the budget. So that's been a shift for them as well.
And then there's lots, we do this talk called Hope and Inspiration. I could go off forever because there's such cool stories. But there's one in Paris, Ontario, where they didn't do a development, but they did a social enterprise where they hired those with different abilities to come and actually make soup in the church kitchen. And that has gone to now multiple locations in multiple cities using church kitchens to make soup. And they sell them at local farmer markets, and local markets, and they're now actually expanding to Farm Boy, which is a local grocery store. And that is also then bringing in younger people into the congregation, and the impact and that they're having in the neighborhood it's not this, how do we get more young people? It's how can we do good? And how